This is Abe Friedtanzer from Awards Buzz. So excited to be speaking with Shawn Hatosy about the Pit. How are you, Shawn?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. This show is incredibly popular, and you occupy a very interesting space in it because we see you like for a second, and then many, many weeks go by, everyone got into the show, and then all of a sudden you're back there. So it must have been interesting for you as a, public person and just viewer of the show to not be a part of it, and then all of a sudden be like right in there as everybody was already addicted.
Yeah, it was a unique experience. Also, I only read the first episode and I had no context for what was going on with the other characters throughout the whole season until I watched it pretty much with you guys. So, it was happening, in real time as I watched with my family. Like there were things that occurred, um, because I show up in that first episode. I'm on the roof. Abbott has had a very rough night. He's standing there the audience doesn't know he's got a prosthetic leg. So he has this deep hidden trauma that we'll start to get into later. But what the writers did that was such a helpful thing, I think, for Abbott as a character. He hands off this letter that about the veteran that he lost, and which Robbie reads, and then he also mentions the pregnant teen, and the mifepristone and how she's going to come back, and what that did was it keeps him alive in a very unique way. It captures the dynamic between Dr. Robbie and Abbott. You see, there's this unspoken thing that happens where Abbott, he kind of fudges the measurements so that she can get what she needs. And he doesn't even have to explain that to Robbie. Robbie just knows. It just kind of shows that they're sort of they're very in sync, in this kind of ER cowboy way.
I think obviously audiences have a lot of sympathy for Robbie just because of how much he goes through and what they see in the flashbacks and everything else. But I also feel like we have to assume that Abbott had a very similar kind of night right before that, right? That's
Exactly.
the indication is that he's just come off saying that even though he has his own experience, he's been through just as much because there's something about this place that's just so draining, especially at the level of the position that they both have.
Totally. And it poses kind of the theme and the question of, um, what the show is. It's he looks over the edge, Abbott, and says, I don't know why I keep coming back here. Particularly given that, he, he, we don't ever say it, but we know he's a vet, and he's just spent 3 hours trying to save a guy who made it through 3 tours and then comes back and then is hit by a drunk driver. And as we sort of, transition towards the end, and then now the very last episode, he comes out on the roof and finds Robbie, and the words he says to him, seem very light. You're in my spot. Um, but what it really is saying is, I see you. I've been there, and I literally have been in your shoes. So yeah, it's very powerful stuff, uh, to explore, and one of the most, um, I guess, the end of that was so surreal. The rooftop scene, not just because of the emotion, but because of the timing. That was only my second day on set, and here I was stepping into the emotional spine of the season without having lived any of the buildup. But sometimes that kind of disorientation actually serves the character. Abbott is carrying around things he doesn't say out loud, and there's this quiet weight to that, in a way. Not knowing everything worked in my favor. I had to rely on my presence, not preparation, and having Noah there fully locked in and John behind the camera creating that space. It gave me everything I needed. That scene didn't require a plan. It just required, honesty.
Also, the mass shooting episode is a big showcase, which I feel like is so like if for some reason you're not already hooked by that point on this show, I think that's one that's just it's so hard to escape from that. And that's also a perfect chance for him to sort of slip back in and just he's there. He's not there
He's
to
the
like rehash it. He's there to just be helpful and just do whatever they can. And that's, I think, what was watching that obviously was very intense for people. What was it like actually filming it?
well, it, it was very scary because uh I I'm coming in episode 12 after this unit has been together. They've, the the order has been established. There's been so much training and being thrown in front of the camera, having to develop this kind of deliver this jargon that's that's very foreign to our tongues. It was scary, but you know the one thing that I think really lands and why the show works is the characters are so well drawn. They each have a very strong point of view. They all have their their histories. They all have little flaws that are revealed slowly throughout this day. But at its core and why it's original, what separates it from other medical things we've seen on television is the medicine really does come first. We kind of operate outward from there and everything is built around it. It's not it's not dumbed down. It's complicated stuff, but audiences are really intelligent and they understand. So we don't spoon feed it. And in the same way, the visual of seeing these things is not something that we censor. It is shown as is. Um, and I think that authenticity is what is so appealing. And as an actor, uh, if you're attacking something from that point of view of just touching it and experiencing it in real time, the the performance becomes hidden. You're hidden behind what's happening, and and it feels great. It really does feel like you're doing it. And I haven't had that a lot throughout my career. I had it on Southland. We sort of worked um, the same way. I've collaborated with John on some television I'm really proud of: Southland, Animal Kingdom, Rescue High Surf, and now the Pit. And I've been so damn fortunate that every character has been completely transformative. And you know that's a dream to to work with someone who's open to letting things evolve, who trusts you enough to follow an instinct even when it's messy or unexpected. That kind of collaboration, it doesn't it doesn't just make the work better, but it reminds you why you got into it in the first place.
I don't want to get you or me in trouble, but I assume you have some idea of what's to come in season two. And I think my main question is, are you going to be there the whole time, as far as you
I don't know exactly what the writers have in store. I will be there. I'll be around, and I can't wait to find out in what capacity. I have such admiration for Scott and Noah and John and what they've delivered. Season one has it's really it's it's done something so special in the business and also out in the world. I'm finding that I'm running into people all the time who are are medical professionals that just respect what we've done and how we've gotten it right. And I've just had people reach out to me that are going through some forms of PTSD, uh, and it's just so nice to have a conversation with people in a meaningful way about something I'm passionate about, but also it's just there's something very cathartic about it.
absolutely. What's your burning question about Abbott that you'd really love to have answered?
Oh man. God, that's a good question. I haven't even thought about that. Um, you know, I know a little bit about his history in terms of how he got to where he is. And Scott, I think, did this with all the characters, gave a pretty rich history and backstory. So, you know, there are definitely questions about how he ended up, um, you know, a single leg amputee, and how he came into. I mean, obviously he was a combat medic, um, but I think that there are so many opportunities to go back into that trauma, in seasons like 7, 8, 9, 10, and I'm very excited to go there.
You mentioned Southland Animal Kingdom before, and I was thinking Ben Mendelsohn is this actor who like is so I feel like blowing up right now with the Marvel and Star Wars roles, but I first saw him, I think, in the film Animal Kingdom, and he's just so terrifying and intense. And I know that you played the same character in the show, and I'm curious, how much you modeled that performance after Ben's take on the character.
Well, I it's hard not to think about it, because that was our source material, and there were a lot of scenes in the pilot episode of Animal Kingdom that were similar to what was in the movie. I have he's he's one of my favorite actors, so that was another thing that's kind of like trippy and surreal. But he was his portrayal in the film, in that narrative, because it's only like 102 hours or whatever, it is very different, and I don't think that we could sustain that type of nefarious like straight up disturbed, demented kind of guy, and keep the audience rooting for us. So I think what the writers Jonathan Lisco and John, um were able to do was draw a character who seemingly disturbed and awful, and in it for the wrong reasons, but as the story unfolds, you start to sympathize with him just because of the toxic relationship that Smurf and Pope had, and how she sort of manipulated and used him. But Ben Mendelsohn is just so terrific, and you know, even if I tried to emulate him, I know I couldn't, so I wouldn't disrespect him by even trying.
I had the chance to talk to Fiona Dourif a couple days ago, and I said, like, I want to use the enthusiasm and like popularity of the Pit to get another season of Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, which certainly did not have the same viewership. So I feel like Southland and Animal Kingdom, while a bit niche, did have strong viewerships. So what's the project from your past that you want people to go back and like give another shot because it was not widely seen enough?
You ask all the good questions. Oh my gosh. Well, I am finding that the popularity of the Pit, which has been like remarkable and just kind of life changing, has brought on a new influx of fandom that I haven't experienced, and people are now finding, um, a younger audience is finding Animal Kingdom, and they like it. So I'm very actually happy about that, because I'm proud of the show. I love what we accomplished through 6 seasons. I also it he Pope is one of my favorite characters because of um like what we were talking about before, how he seems like the one that you should hate, but by the end, the writers did such a wonderful job that make you kind of feel for him. It's also a very physical role, which I kind of, I dig. And it's also a role that if you have a character who shows up in a scene and doesn't have to say anything, but he still has an impact just by being there, his presence, just from listening. I think that's a successful character. And Pope was somebody who towards the end, he was just such an animal. He didn't really say anything. He just sort of he listened and reacted, and that kind of acting is it's a lot of fun. So I'm glad people are finding it. And Southland's another one, it's just such it's a terrific show. Another one that I think from the procedure standpoint, we really spent a lot of time trying to get it right. And the police elements came first, and then we built out from there. And very similar to the Pit, that it gets it gets noticed by the people that do it in a very special way, where you feel like you're collaborating.
I like to end all my interviews by asking, what are you watching? What have you seen recently on TV that really is sticking with you? And the person I just spoke to was like, I would do anything to get a role in the Pit. If you ever talk to anyone from the Pit, let them know that. And so I thought that was very funny because you can't say that. The Pit is not an okay answer for you to say. I need to know what else you're watching. But the Pit is one of the most frequent things. And again, just came up in conversation, which was very funny.
Well, that's hilarious. I would too also say I would like to get a role in the Pit, and continue to be there, because it is what's happening on stage 22 in Burbank is pretty special. It's just it's like an acting troupe, but we're all working together with crew and cast, and it feels so collaborative, and I'm happy to be a part of it. Oh my God, like HBO is making some terrific television. The White Lotus, The Last of Us. You know, my good friend Mark Roybal produced a show called Mayor of Easttown, and they have this new one called Task coming out, which I read those episodes, a couple of them, and it's wonderful. Brad Englesby. Yeah, White Lotus. Let's say that would be the one, right? Maybe
Yes,
you
I
could
feel
go
like
someplace fancy like Hawaii and spend 7 months, bring your family. I don't know. That sounds fun.
I think The White Lotus, Last of Us, Severance, and The Pit are the four most common answers. So you're in good company here for sure.
Right on.
So, all right, well, Shawn, thank you so much. I am looking forward to speaking to you again when we find out more about season two. But this has been a pleasure, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Abe. Take care.